And we are recording. All of the videos are posted of the classes that we have. We missed one or two at the very early classes because I didn't pull the trigger. But they're all up on Canvas. If you want to reference one and for some reason you can't make the link, or shoot me a quick text and I'll just send you directly the link to the YouTube if that's something that you need and want to do. Today we're a little bit past the halfway point of this module on talent development. We've talked about a lot of topics that normally wouldn't be just in a normal management class, or they're really looking at how do we help develop the human potential in our companies, and ultimately that we kind of schlep that job off to HR department, and then we don't give them any authority to do it. And so, if it's your company, you want to make sure that everybody is kind of focused on all of us getting better at what we do all the time. We talk about continuous improvement in production from a Lean Six Sigma point of view. We believe that all processes can be improved, all of them, always. And if we really believe that, that means that the delivery of this class can be improved. That means that the way we onboard people can be improved, the way we train people can be improved. All of the things that are soft skills can be improved, including our own talent. And so really that's kind of the mindset we're talking about, and we're trying to establish that and as part of the culture of the company, so that the company says we're a learning company. We are driven to get better at what we do, and we'll help each other get better instead of expose their defects and throw them under the bus. We've all worked in that environment where we've been on pins and needles, because if somebody sees that we've made a mistake, they don't try to help improve my skill sets. They make sure the boss knows about it loud and clear, and they rat me out. And that's toxic. That's not the kind of environment for talent development. What that does is make somebody want to bail. It makes somebody want to get out of the organization, and will lose good talent in the process of that. We're going to lose a certain number of people no matter what, because if they have a successful career with us at some point in time, they may retire, and they've earned that. And so we're gonna lose people to that, if nothing else. But there's other things, right? Somebody wins the lottery and they buy an island in the Bahamas, and they're gone, they're out of here. Somebody has family reasons that they need to move, and they're gone and they're out of here. Somebody only took the job in the first place, and they told us they were going to work for 3 years while they were getting their degree, and we accepted them as part of the team with that premise, that they were going to college and that they were going to leave when they achieved that milestone. And that's okay. We'll have that kind of turnover. It's the kind that people leave with their hair on fire because we've got a dysfunctional organization. That's a problem. And people leave because we've got a management team that doesn't have a well-oiled machine, and those ricochets hit the employees and tear them down. And so talent development is about that. So today we are going to look at one of the things that we blame on people leaving. Look at compensation. And you had an assignment to read 2 handouts about compensation, and then I have a third handout to give you that we will talk about in a few minutes. You don't need to get it quite yet. We're going to talk about some other stuff. But this handout is an interesting one. This is part of a program. If you've always wondered, but we're never in a spot to see firsthand, this is a document from the Pentagon. And some stuff from the Pentagon is not classified. And the Pentagon has responsibility for an awful lot of employees. When you think about it, the Pentagon has responsibility for all the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and FBI and CIA and so forth. They have a lot. And I thought it was interesting. My very first exposure to that side, the non-spy world side of the CIA, happened completely by accident in my world. I was living in Illinois, and I was traveling a lot. And when I could travel and take my wife with me, I did at that point. And we had animals, and so dogs and birds, and I don't remember what we had at that point, but there were animals at the house. I had put an ad in the paper because the lady that had been feeding our animals had to move. She was leaving the Champaign, Illinois area, and I had to find somebody else that could come feed the animals while we were out of town. And I got a call from a little girl. She was about 10 or 11 years old, and she said, "I'm just a kid, but I love animals and I want to come feed your animals. Can I have the job?" And I said, "Well, first of all, let's have an interview." And she said, "Well, I was prepared for that. My mom and my dad know, and I have their permission, and they will drive me to your house, and you can come talk to my parents, and I really want the job." And so this little girl, Marie Tan was her name, and I thought, how can you not hire this kid? You know, she's sweet and aggressive and loves animals, and I'd go for it. So we hired her, got to know her and her parents. Her parents had given permission. Mom worked at the University of Illinois. Dad didn't seem to have a job. And we got to know them for probably a year or 2 years, and she was completely reliable, perfect employee. One time her dad said to me, he said, "I gave your name to a colleague of mine, and I hope you're okay with that, and you're going to get a call. Is that all right?" I said, "Okay." I got a call, and his colleague was with the CIA. And I didn't know what you do when the CIA calls you. It's like, it's almost like the IRS calling you in my mind. It was kind of weird. And so I he wanted to meet with me, and I met with him, and he said, we know you're traveling a lot out of the country. I was traveling out. I had a plant in Germany and was going elsewhere. And he said, "No, you're traveling a lot, and we would like to talk with you every time you come back to the United States. And when you leave, we'd like to have you look at some things. And so, what are you asking me to do?" and he clarified it a bit, and we went through the security clearance process, and just like he was hiring any employee. It was exactly like the hiring process for any employee. The clearance took a little longer, but it was exactly like that. And the end of that story is, before I actually got too many paychecks, I asked if you could get out of that, because I didn't really want to do that. That wasn't a career. It was, they asked for some photographs if I was going to be in a city and of public stuff. It was no spy work at all. It was just, you're traveling on business, and when you come home, we want to ask you a couple of questions, and they would ask those questions. And it really was an interesting way for them to collect information. And as a citizen of the United States, I kind of thought at first you had an obligation to do that. But as I kind of got into it a little bit more, I realized that that's not I wasn't comfortable with what was going on. But I got to know what Peter Tan was doing. He was in the CIA, and the CIA have operatives at every university campus in the United States. They track people from outside the United States send their kids to college in the United States, and so their job is to keep track and learn information that they can about the families of the kids that are going to college. And I thought that was an interesting job of the CIA. This is a document of how they hire people, and there's a whole category. I later took that document as a contractor for the Air Force. They use the same document when they train civilian employees at Nellis and at the local Air Force bases here in this region. And so when they hire civilians, they have an HR process that they have to teach, and I got involved on a contract basis teaching that. And it was an earlier version, but it's this document. And I wanted to show us all this document and walk us into it a little bit, because a lot of the problems that we have in pay and being fair in pay are because we're a little company. We haven't evolved it yet. And United States government's a big company, and they have evolved it. And the guy that, our lady that brings your mail to your neighborhood, that person is the post office was a U.S. Entity, but the paychecks still come through the Department of Treasury for the Postal Service, and they know exactly when their next pay raise would be based on merit or not merit. They know exactly what the next promotion would be in something as simple as working for the post office. Working for the military, it's the same thing. If you're a buck private in the Marine Corps, you know what you have to do to become a corporal, and the pay change that happens accordingly. And if you get assigned to a combat zone, you know what kind of extra pay you will get. We've worked this out before. And so I thought it would be of value to us to take a look at some of that stuff, because someday you may be working for a private company that is doing government contracts. You may be working for a private company that has grown to the point that we have exactly the same criteria to put things in place that the U.S. government has. And by looking at some of the questions we're going to walk through in this handout, we'll kind of get an idea of some of the things we should be thinking about in our littler companies, if that makes sense. So like I said, this is not a classified document. I have the entire training process that I will post up on Canvas. This is just one chapter of it. Performance pay is another chapter of it. We have been talking about how do you establish incentives and performance pay, and we'll get a glimpse of how. Did you know that the CIA has performance pay? They have incentive bonuses. That's kind of like, I don't know if I want to know that or not, but they do. And you would think they would. It's a place to work that's pretty plain for most of the people. I talked to the local FBI agents here in St. George. They have 3 offices in St. George, the FBI does. And they're going, it's not the kind of place you're thinking it's to work. We look at computer drives. We look at hard drives. That's all we do. We look at software and numbers, and if you don't like sitting in a room looking at a column of numbers, you're not going to want to be in the FBI, because the guys that you see in the movies, that's not the day-to-day at the FBI. And I think the same is pretty much true of the CIA. It's a job. And there are lots of support jobs. In fact, the document that we are looking at is the civilian interface. That is the role that I was in if I'd have taken it. A civilian interface. I wasn't going to be a career track, in the Central Intelligence Agency. It was going to be a subcontracted, a civilian. And they hire lots and lots of those in many of the military. That's part of how we're doing, getting by with the smaller armed forces, because we have a lot of civilian contractors that do, the F-35 aircraft maintenance is largely done at Hill Air Force Base with civilians, trained and classified and so forth, but they're not done with, 4-year sign-in guys that have learned the ropes of the F-35. They're contractors that have done that have learned that and are under contract, but they're not technically a part of our military. And so we have a growing number of civilian contractors. We have a lot of private companies in St. George that the company has a lot more horsepower than it actually has personnel, because they use private contractors as well. So we call them subcontractors, right? You get busy and you need to hire somebody in your guard shack, and rather than hiring somebody yourself, you go outside the company and you hire a guard, security or something like that. That's a contractor kind of operation. And we have a lot of that. So we're going to talk about that. We had, and so we also are going to talk about the generational ages. We have, I don't know, 7 generations alive right now, roughly, taking people all the way up to 120. There's not that many up at that age bracket, but the age group that's older than the traditionalists and that are older than the baby boomers, that are older than the Gen Xers, that are older than the millennials, and then we've got the Gen Y and the Gen Z now, and we're going to look a little bit at that because every generation has different things about the generation, and I said we dedicate a little time in class about that. It's important for us to understand that, you know, the background, the music, the norms, the technologies, all change generation to generation, and that has an impact in the workforce. We don't have 7 generations in the active workforce right now because some are babies, and that generation has not yet developed its personality of what its likes and preferences and so forth will be. And the oldest generation is no longer in the workforce either. So we arguably have about 5 generations in our current workforce, counting the Generation Z or Generation Z, if you're Canadian or British. I've got a video that does call it Generation Z, and that's the UK version of a Z, the letter Z. So, you know, Z28 is a Z28 in Toronto. Y'all know that, and it kind of takes me a minute to think, what are they talking about? Generation Alpha is the next one. Those kids are in high school. Right now, we don't have many of them in the workforce. They are even younger than everybody in this room. Even though even you're on the edge of it. Brendan, I don't know if you're the youngest one here, but you're the tallest one. So I don't, you know, I think so. Anyway, Jake might be up there. I don't know. We don't stratify by that. I want to talk about why the Titanic sank. And some of you are prepared to give presentations today. Some of you need another day, and I'm okay with that. I want to have a kind of a general conversation about what your thoughts are. What the idea was root cause analysis, and the facts are we don't know for sure. You know, there's a conspiracy theory that they never even hit an iceberg, right? If you did your research, you found that one, that they made that whole thing up, you know, we talk about analyzing web pages. You can't believe all of them, and they're certainly not all right. Just on the Titanic thing, documentaries, and you go, oh, it's National Geographic, so it's got to be true. No, it doesn't. It's probably the truth as best they know it, but they've been fooled by some pretty stout science over the years, and I think all reporters fear getting false information and making a documentary on it, and I don't know that National Geographic did that with the Titanic, but you all saw different perspectives and theories as you did your research. And so I want to hear a little bit about that, and I don't have a completely scientific way that we're going to present your stuff. I'm just going to, those of you that are ready to talk about it in a while, we'll spend some time in class talking about that, and I'll check your, it's a checkbox. You can, it's part of the criteria for this class that you do this presentation or you do the root cause analysis anyway. And I said this class is not a 4-point, 5-point, 3-point grade average. This is a pass-fail class, right? You do it, you get checked off on it. I won't give you a D or a D minus on anything. I don't have the qualification or the calibration to do that. If you did the assignment, I check it off that you did the assignment. And it's up to you if you learned anything. We'll put some information out there, but for the most part, you learn what you choose to learn, right? And that's pretty much where we're at in life. You're here because you want to learn. So, we'll talk about things that give you the opportunity to learn. I also have a video with the guy that I want to introduce to you, who, after you watch the video, you might want to look at these books. These are 4 of the books that I grabbed quickly in my office. He's written more than that. I have more than that. I'm just not sure where they all are. But after you get introduced to him in a little video clip, you may put him on your list of business leaders that you want to follow and learn a little bit more about. I know some of you are building your own personal libraries as part of your management credentials and your management qualifications that you're learning from places where you can learn. And he's an author that I would recommend to you, and we'll look at that. We promised that we would have a video on the 7 businesses that don't fail. And we didn't have time in class, the last class, to show that. So I want to make sure we do show that. It's a short video. Make sure we want to show that today. Let's start with compensation, because that's the driest of the topics. You had 2 articles to read. And I asked you to do that and come prepared to talk a little bit about what you read. So rather than read these articles to us in class, what I'd like to know is some volunteers. I am going to call the book, the one that says Compensation Strategy on it, as Article 1. What are compensation and benefits as Article 2? So we've got Article 1 and Article 2. And I'm just going to ask for some contributions. You can have the article in front of you. If you read it and there were some things that struck you as you read it, I'd like to hear about a few of those.
Well, I did have a quick story. On the one that I was reading, I guess the one you're calling Article 1, it was saying that the employees should not see the components of the compensation. Why would that be? Would you want them to know where the money's coming from, or how they're trying to?
Is that meaning where it's coming from, or what the elements are?
They didn't really say why. It just said the employees can read about the compensation policy, but they should know about the strategic compensation components, and that I didn't understand why.
In for-profit companies, a place you can get into trouble. That's a good question, and it's a thinking question that you're asking there, because we've been talking a lot about transparency in this class, saying, it's a value to let your people know. But let me put that on hold for 1 second and just give you an example in my world, in my life as a consultant. I thought it would be a great idea. I approached my stockbroker at one point and I said, hey, how about we change your pay plan? If the stock goes up, you get a commission. If the stock goes down, you don't. How about that? And there's not one out there I've found that's willing to do that. They don't operate that way. In other words, they don't guarantee their performance at all. And many of the consulting world, the people that have consulting firms like mine, they don't guarantee their stuff either. You hire the consultant, they come in, and maybe you do what they ask, maybe you botch it up, maybe you don't. Either way, they walk away and they get paid, even if it doesn't work for you guys. If you completely rearrange a production line and you walk away, at the end of the day, it's yours, and whether it works or not, they get paid. And I thought, I paid a lot, yeah. So I thought, what if I structured contracts with my clients that said, if what I am taking you through does not work, you don't pay me. But if it does work, I want a percentage of the increase in profits. That seemed reasonable to me. A percentage of the increase in profits. Where I got in trouble on that was that I did a long multi-month intervention with the company. We got results. They may increase their profits by a lot. When they figured it out and realized what they were going to have to pay me, they did some creating accounting and they made the profits go away. Right? So, I mean, all you got to do is buy a piece of gear and all of a sudden the profit's gone. And, so then I didn't get paid. And I was an idiot on that. Actually, I saw it happening, and I thought, I'm gonna ride this out because I wanna learn, because in principle, it's right to get paid on performance. That's the right way to do it. But how do you structure the other side, to be honest with you? And now back to the compensation. So if compensation is based on profit of the ice cream line, and you've got a popsicle line, and the ice cream line is doing well, and I'm expecting payoff of that, but management made a decision halfway through that they'd allocate some expenses on the ice cream line to the popsicle line, and that affects my bonus. Okay, so now they're gonna be in trouble showing me where it came from, because I know that they're hosing me, right? So that's, I think that's,
Yeah.
is that ringing true for you?
It just seems like they take, if you show them, you know, they take care of the equipment, stuff like that. So if you show them why the money went to the popsicle line, then they can understand. You're not lying to them, you know. You're
Right.
showing them, yeah, we were going to pay, we want to pay you, but right now we need to save this. It's coming, don't worry.
But
Good luck with that.
You get in trouble with promising something like
do.
that.
But then another thing could break down or something.
Yeah,
You do.
you never
I
get to the
think
end
that's
goal.
what they're saying. That I'll go back and read it, and if I don't interpret it that way, I'll bring it back to you, and we'll have some
Struck me
additional
out. They know
discussion.
the policy, but not the components going into it. I was like, wouldn't
Yeah.
I think the part of that got me was, I think in a perfect world where everyone sees things on the same page, like, yeah, you can be perfectly transparent with everyone, and everyone's gonna be understanding and see where you're coming from and get it. But we don't exactly live in a perfect world, and not everyone's gonna take things with that kind of understanding, and so some people
Sure.
are gonna blow up and freak out over.
Well, for us, it's not part of our package or anything, but we usually get a bonus at the end of the year. But there's been a time when we haven't, right? So you want to see some mad people when we don't get a bonus. They
Yeah.
just blow up, but because they don't understand where it had to go.
And unfortunately, you know, the bonus is a bonus. It's not promised. It's not guaranteed. It's something that the boss decides to do because he can. And another thing along those lines is when we talk about being transparent or knowing where the money is coming from, right? On several years in a row, the boss would come down and say, "Hey, you know, we had a great year. We made $12 million this year. Everything is going great. You guys did a great job." And people are looking at their bonus like $600-700. Where's my part of the 12 million? They don't see the overhead. They don't see the, you know, the cost of material, turning the lights on, paying independent contractors in another state, all of the customer service problems that they got to pay out, which is, you know, and sometimes it gets to the point where we are paying a customer to take our product. Not on all, but there are some situations where that happens, and they don't see that. They don't care about that. You know, I'm here on the front lines. I just made you $12 million this year. Where's my kickback? And so some of that, what I get out of that is, you know, they don't need to know where the money's coming from. They just need to know that they have an opportunity to earn some of that money. If last year I talked to Dennis, before we have this, you know, this Christmas party, can you not tell people how much money we made this year? Well, what are you talking about? I mean, well, it's your business. You do what you want, but there's a lot of pushback when you tell how much how much money we made this year for your overhead, and then they come to me and say, "Well, I want a $2 raise."
Yeah.
He can afford it. He just made $12 million last year. He can afford to pay me $2 more an hour. When I'm talking just me and you and him, if we were the only 3 people here, you're absolutely right. But it's not just me, you, and him. There are more things that go into it.
You're getting into an area too that I think that this is a sensitive area for every privately owned
Yes.
company. If you and your family own the company, what the employees don't share in, we'd like them potentially to share in our good times, but they don't share in the bad times other than they go get another job.
Right.
They don't lose their house, and the owners of a company lose their house. You know, their world falls apart if it's not successful. So they're taking risk, and what is the value of that risk? That's a private decision. You know, that's something that the family or the owner of a business has to evaluate and think through. And being generous with the profits they still are accepting and taking all the risk themselves. They're not giving away any of the risk. And so, you know, if you're going to share the profits more liberally, you need to be sharing in the risk as well, which means you're belling up some of the money, some of the capital, and you're taking a risk on it going away. And so every company handles it differently. I personally prefer to just be completely transparent. Talk about the risk, talk about the profit, and let the folks that work with me think that everything's reasonable, and we'll talk to them through that point. Most people don't begrudge somebody making a large profit if they've taken a large risk and if they've been generous back. It's the tightwads that really have a culture problem in the organization and a morale problem in the organization. If it's clear that they're living high on the hog and they got helicopters and, you know, race cars and resort timeshares all over the world.
He's not that flamboyant. I think a lot of his profit goes back into the company.
See, that's the other thing.
He
too.
owns everything. He owns the building, he owns the machines, he owns,
Yeah.
there's nothing out on loan, right? Everything is bought and paid for.
Right.
Which really helps us when the economy crashes or
Yeah.
gets a lot slower,
Yeah.
right? We don't have to worry about, oh no, we might lose the building because he owes the
Yeah,
bank.
bank comes in and auctions off your equipment.
Yeah, that doesn't
You get
happen.
paid,
You
Yeah.
know, so he's putting a lot of that back into the company and saving us that risk.
Right, right. And each company and each family has to decide how much they want to explain to the workforce that they have. It's a dicey one. The workforce doesn't understand a lot of times where the money's coming from and going from. If if he said he made 12 million, that's probably a top line profit. It's not
Yeah,
after
that's in sales.
earning, that's gross sales.
Yeah,
Well,
gross
then,
sales, yeah.
I mean, that says nothing about
That
whether
dwindles real fast.
Yeah.
you may be bleeding, you know.
Would you argue that being more transparent about the net and being more transparent about all the charges can help soften that issue?
I've found that, you almost always can talk about percentages of the gross. And that doesn't translate into dollars and cents until you actually are in the accounting department. If we say right now, our cost of, if you're running a restaurant, this is a pretty much a number that is true of all types of restaurants that I've been involved in. It may not be for a buffet, but the rest of the restaurants, your cost of food needs to be 28% or less of your gross. And so it doesn't, you're not talking about how much cash profit you make. You're talking about driving your cost and not throwing food away and not giving too much food to the customers. Don't eat the extra thing. Keep it at 28% of your cost. If it's a $10 meal, the food cost should be $2.80 or something like that on that bill. And if you're over that, your business is dicey. And I could give somebody a bonus on driving our cost of food to 25%, for example. I could say, you drop that down 3%, I'll share that 3% with you. And because you're driving it and making that happen. Then it becomes personal for them about how much it is, but they don't know all the details of our gas bill and all that other stuff, and my retirement account and, the other kind of stuff. Owners put money into things, like it's common with partners to have a policy, a key man insurance policy. So, and it's based on the valuation of the business. So the company is making a contribution to a life insurance policy that may be a $10 million life insurance policy. That's expensive, but it's security for the two partners. If one of them dies, the other one gets enough money to buy the wife out of their ownership and in that insurance policy. But last year we made that payment and got nothing out of it. because he didn't die, right? And the year before that, we made that insurance payment, got nothing out of it. And the employees may go, well, the hell with the insurance policy, pay me cash. You know, but they don't understand all that risk that's going on that is covered, that was in a partnership agreement. I'm not saying you have to do that, I'm just saying that's often in a partnership agreement. So it would be a cost that you would,
Just so much in it that you don't even know if they'd wanna be looking at everything, you know? It's just so, there's no way to understand unless you're in it and see it, and it's a lot.
it
But
is a lot.
anybody who has a well-functioning brain should just assume, you know, it is a lot. There's a lot they don't understand about the way it works, but, I mean, I can understand too, not knowing, it does make, if you hear that your company made $12 million, you don't realize how much of it's gone already.
No, you don't.
In some cases, I mean, I do annual budgeting, so I can kind of see like every single expense and all the operating costs, and then it's kind of interesting because I can see their ROI, which we talked about as well.
Mhm.
So sometimes I don't want to say every CEO's a little bit greedy. At least in ours, you know, like our electric bill and gas bill, we make all of our residents pay for it. So we don't want to like pay for our power, so we have all of our residents pay for it. So, and their loans kind of on a fixed rate. So then when they increase everyone's rent by $500 in 1 year, and you know, they don't. I know there's housing stuff, but you know, it's going through the roof here. I'm sure you guys know. But
But
The
their,
roof is
their
gone,
loan
dude. It's
did
like
go
up in the sky.
Yeah.
yeah.
We're hitting airplanes.
Yeah.
So, well, it's a unique position because I do budgeting too, like
So you
every
can see
year, so I can kind of
Yeah.
see like literally every single expense that we do. So when you kind of see that, it's kind of weird when you talk about compensation. You can see, they let you see everything, and then you know.
Well, we were one of the classes a while ago, we were talking about information and papers, and if when you're negotiating with somebody, that negotiating class we're talking about, if you talk to them and tell them something like this is what's going on, but then they see the actual wording of it, they're going to be like, oh, okay, you have me now, I'm lost, because some word was just not quite correctly. But you go tell somebody, hey, you're gonna get a bonus on what we make this year. Oh, cool, done deal. They're gonna get a bonus. Now the paper that says you're gonna get a bonus on the stuff is probably this long. Depend on this, depend on this, depend on how this goes. Now if you show them that, they're gonna be like, I'd be like, no, I'd rather not have a bonus because I ain't playing your game, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's more of, hey, if we do this, and then he can come back. He has that information that he has that you don't. He can come in and say, hey, we didn't make it. You know, this is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. So we weren't able to make it. Now fix this. Now if we went and said, oh, I want to see all your paperwork, and oh, dude, you just made $1 million. I know you did because it says it right here. Yeah, but I had to pay me $500,000, and I had to pay this guy $300,000. Now you're becoming a problem. Where if you just said, hey, we just didn't make it, you don't give them that information for them to come up with stuff.
We
It's-
just
it's
started
not-
calling bonuses gifts at Christmas
Yeah.
time because you
Well,
are
they
all
do.
not on the hook for any kind of a structured,
That's a
You
really
know what I mean?
wise thing.
so we
Well,
just
a lot
started
of
calling it a
companies do
gift.
that. Buy a TV, we give you a 75-inch TV versus $1,000 bonus.
Mhm.
Because 75 TV is
And then they're not
is a
on the
product.
hook for payroll taxes and
Exactly.
neither are you.
That's true too. The cost of giving those gifts
Mhm.
is less than the cost of giving the bonus.
We try to give gift
Yeah.
cards and stuff too a lot, so.
That's interesting. Well, you brought up some really, really good points, and Larry, that was a good question, and we didn't answer it, we just danced around it a little bit.
Like I said, I didn't get it
Like, I
either.
forgot my
It
question.
just struck me as very odd.
Well, and what we are, one of the conclusions we're all talking towards here is trust. You know, you talked about greedy owners, and there are greedy owners, and if there's greedy owners that are trying to feather their nest with my sweat and not fairly compensate me back, I'm on the wrong bus. And they're gonna have to find another sucker to help them, you know.
But it seems like the whole rental thing in southern Utah, at least probably all of Utah, is that way. They've all determined it's a market value issue where they can just raise their rents so high because cost of all housing is so high. But their expenses really haven't gone up. I mean, energy, yeah, but like their mortgages haven't gone up unless they did a crappy refinance, which would be stupid. So why? Why are they doing it to people? They
They don't
really
want
are
you to save
gouging
for a
people.
house either, so the more they increase your rent, you can't save for that down payment on a
No.
house, a lot of people are saying. Kinda cause they can, I mean, they all kinda call, every single company around here all calls each
So
other
what
and
are you,
decides
what are
kinda
you
like the
charging?
gas prices
Yeah,
and just.
yeah.
It's gotta
It's
follow
like-
the housing. You can't get a house and have a, $2,000 house payment and then have rent being $500 a month. Nobody's gonna buy a house, which is gonna crash the housing market. So rent, even though it sucks, has gotta stay pretty close to what a house payment's gonna be in that area or around that area. And they'll do that too. They'll call, hey, what is the average house payments? Cause everybody knows it's easy to get it. And so the rent was they're like, hey, when I moved into my house, they said, hey, your house payment's gonna be about this amount of dollars. You're gonna pay rent this exact same amount of dollars. And I'm
That's
like,
just wrong.
okay, until you.
Then they need to lower the house cost, but it's,
You're
This
right.
This is a big
For
problem.
sure.
This housing thing is a big
Yeah.
problem. And,
it's because
and,
of California.
we're not approaching
It
it
is,
fixed.
I mean, we came from California too, but they're determining our market prices because they can come in and pay cash, so much more
Absolutely.
cash than anybody here can, and it's a great deal for them and it sucks for
Yeah,
us.
so if you contract around and building massive houses, you know, building affordable housing.
The
So, I
income
mean, the
will never
smaller side
follow
also.
what the expenses are. It's close. They'll get there. I mean, I remember you could get a job for $20 an hour here in St. George if you wanted to, unless you own your own business, you were making that. But $20 an hour, if you had a nice house, you had an okay house, you were working out of town. I was working out of town. I worked out of town for years. Now the housing market's gone. People have moved in. Businesses are coming in. You can find $30, $35, $40 an hour jobs.
Well, and COVID has done a pretty,
You know what?
gonna have a job fair. With COVID, America has changed our reach for talent too, with people working from home. And we have an awful lot of working from home people in southern Utah that are making their wages outside of this county, because they're working at home. And that skews those of us that live here and have to pay here and get paid here. So that's a problem, and we're not gonna solve that now. The county commission and the city council and
I think we should. Let's
yeah.
take it to the county like tomorrow.
I've been on in a few of those meetings, and it's a complex problem, and I don't know how we exactly fix it, but I do know that Salisbury isn't the highest end builder in this town. They make nice houses. They've got a good strategy and good business model. I don't vouch for Rick Salisbury and his wife. I don't know them, and I don't know their character, but I understand their business model. If you want to know someday, we can talk about it. It's different. It's disruptive, kind of like Elon Musk has done in the way they pay for materials. The subs don't provide the materials, and that squeezes a margin out that they generally pass on to the buyer of the house. And so you get more house for the price. That said, their cheapest house in this market, you cannot qualify for it without a household income of $80,000. We, in this class, in the spring, we ran the numbers in this class on the board here with the loan officer to say, what if you're a school teacher or a cop and your significant other is 1-2, you don't have enough household income to buy Salisbury's cheapest house, and they're not the high-end builder. In the Entrada, the Cantus, the Stonecliff, the other neighborhoods that the high-end builders are in, that's just out of reach to, you drive down a neighborhood and you see this amazing house and it's got a basketball, portable thing in the driveway, and you go, who works here? Who lives here? Where do they work? They got kids this big. How are they making enough money to pay for this house? This is a question beyond compensation, although it's woven about compensation, because that's what we're talking about. Eventually, our neighborhood will catch up with the norm. But
Well,
one of
really quick, sorry to
Sure.
jump in as that. A lot of these places are using that because they can't keep up. Because even in St. George, the companies aren't making that much. They're not to a point being here, but they're using that or saying, hey, okay, this whatever job you're gonna get paid $50,000 a year, but we only can pay this much, but we're gonna give you all this. When I was a cop, the thing sucked. I hated it. I was getting paid. I could afford government housing, but the benefits that came with it was the whole reason why I stayed. They were amazing. You can't beat them.
Schools try to do that too, you know, the college here has good business.
But what these compensation is
That
they're
helps.
taking, cause like I said, we were talking about before, physical things, they don't have to pay for that. Cash, they have to pay for it, that kind of stuff, but insurance, these bonuses that we're gonna give you, paid vacation, all this kind of stuff
Yeah.
gets thrown into this other account that doesn't get taxed yet.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, look, they're giving us all this money, that's 50 grand worth of it, and we're like, dude, they just saved 500 grand by giving you that 50 grand.
True, but it's still a win-win.
Right,
Yeah, it's
right, it
still
is,
a win-win,
absolutely.
yeah. One of the things that I wanna, I'm kind of watching our time a little bit, I want to, get into this other handout, maybe that's the fastest way to do it. Let's just pass that around, or get up and come get one. Everybody needs one with the number 6 on the top of it, I'm gonna keep one for me too. And I'll get slides turned back on so we can hit a couple things that I think that's important for us to know. Okay. We need this. Thank you. Let's get this going.
Oh boy. Is this like, given on the first day and they get 12 months to go through it?
Well, this is only one of 17. Woo, lesson. It is a lot more, and we're not gonna go over all that. There's a couple things that I want to kind of take us through, and there's an exercise that I'll point to you that we're not gonna take class time to do in this class, because I don't think we need to do that, but, there are some things, so the government and all government employees have pay kind of broken down to things that have importance to the person that's being hired. So there's the issue of base salary in the United States government. They cannot have it all over the map. It has to be established in such a way that it's reasonable and fair. Well, it should be in law bids too. You know, it should be fair, doesn't mean it's the same. Fair. And those of you that are parents with more than one child know that we like to treat our children, I'm gonna use a word that's not possible, equally. You cannot treat anyone equally. Cannot. It's impossible.
You have different variables.
But you can treat them fairly. And fairly is different to different personalities and to different temperaments and to different of your own children. And so you cannot treat them equally. Circumstances in your household will change, and you just aren't gonna be able to do that. None of us are gonna be able to do that. So you don't say you're gonna. But there has to be a fairness to it, so that everybody that's delivering mail across the United States in the same kind of environment should be getting the same kind of range of pay based on their experience and pressures and volumes that are pushed on it. So the base salary, and then look what the CIA in this case for civilian contractors, they have on top of the base salary a local market supplement, and they have a targeted local market supplement. And those are, and if you Google local market supplement for Atlanta, Georgia, it will show you government pay, county or county by township and township by township, because there's different economics in the greater Atlanta area. So depending on where you live, your local market supplement is going to be different in the metropolitan Atlanta area. never done that here as a local employer, but you could think about it if we had, let's say you had a sales team that was scattered, and you had a sales office in St. George, and you had a sales office in Jackson, Mississippi, and you had a sales office in San Jose, California. Will you have a local market supplement? The answer is you will. It will cost less to live in Jackson, Mississippi. It will cost more to live in St. George, and it will cost even more to live in San Jose. And so the local market supplement is on top of the fair base salary that's reasonably the same. Now, when you think of it structured that way, that's acceptable to explain to anybody. Now, what people want to do is they want to get the San Jose pay and live, somewhere in, a cheap spot, so you pocket that differential. That's not fair either. That's not fair to the employer, right? So this has got to be fair in both directions. We need to have some way that there is an annual adjustment. School teachers want a cost of living offset. That's your 5th grade teacher in St. George. And so the legislature talks about that every year for their budgets. Well, what about our people? Did their cost of living change too? The answer is yes, it has. And if our company's profits aren't reflecting those things, then we need to restructure what we're doing and get better at it. Because the company has to support all this stuff. I understand that. Federal government can easily support it because we just go in debt, right? And the budget works differently for these guys, but Congress still changes their appropriations, don't they? The United States military's appropriations get changed. The last wave of the 222 guys that went to the Middle East or to Afghanistan, many of them bought their own gear. The Army did not, the Marine Corps detachment did not provide the latest backpack sensing technology that guys could get, a little drone that would go up in the air and see what's over the hill, kind of thing. You'd think that the military would issue that to all soldiers. They don't. The soldiers can buy it on their own. It's military stuff, but they've got to buy it themselves. It's kind of like the cops that have to buy a bulletproof vest. It's like, what's up with that, that should be a necessary piece of gear. But as budget appropriations are changed, sometimes employees have to do things on their own. But do we have something baked in that we can talk about structural pay changes as the economy changes? And that's something most small businesses don't. And I'm not saying small businesses have to. I'm just saying our big company competitors are, whether it's private or public companies. They've got this. This is just the U.S. government as an example, but IBM has it too. GE has it too. The large employers, Google has it too. Setting pay, that's when you're onboarding and establish or changing positions or promoting, you have to talk about how do you set the pay. And in your handout, there's a exercise on topic 4 on setting pay that in a longer class I would take us through that. Other special situations that may affect pay, and in the CIA and in many specialties, we have companies that hire people that have got Mandarin proficiency, for example. Is that worth more money? Probably, because it gives them an advantage. We hire people here that can speak Spanish, or people that have some language proficiency in a market that we are going to, and that is paid for in the United States government. And so, but it's decided how it's going to be paid for. So they have the structure mapped out so that there are, for every type of category within the CIA, there are 3. There's the administrative support, there's the professional work, which I suppose in my imagination I'd call that the hitman. I don't know exactly who that is, professional support. And then you have the management team that's keeping the office together and doing the agent in charge of the FBI. That's this, they're in this box. So each of those has a work level 1, work level 2, work level 3, then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, 4, no 1 on the management team, right? So they start out a little bit higher. And then they have a pay band, and it's stated what the band is. So if you look up GG-12 on Google, do it on your phone right now, there'll be a pay scale for that. GG-12 might be $73,000. And the band would be plus or minus a range, and that's an established range. So in setting pay, you're going to set where is the job at, and where in that range. Is it a young kid that's never done much before? Is it somebody that's been at it for a long while? Is it somebody that's transferred in with all kinds of other experience? That helps you set where in the band a person should be. So you hire somebody that's got cabinet shop experience, they're worth more than somebody that just has a good work ethic. But, you know, I'm a farm kid, I just raised crops. Well, that's of no real value in a woodworking environment other than, you know, I put fence posts in. You know, but that doesn't translate to great value. The work ethic translates, but the skill set doesn't. So this occupational structure is something that they define. All the government jobs that you'll look at, we're just looking at a fun one, but all the government jobs that you would look at have that same thing. The basic principles, you can read this, and if you're involved in setting compensation, take this on as a it's 50 pages. It's not that much. Just flip through, and it's got pictures on it. A bunch of the pages are half a page. So all these slides are on this handout. In terms of what these bullet points are is spelled out on your handout, and your pay structure is the base plus the local offset or not. So we talked about that. The local offsets, we talked about that. Setting it adjusted. You know, what do you link it to? You know, in the case of military, if a place is hostile or on civil war, and we've got to have operatives there, including the secretarial office, right? The ministry, we got file systems and radio antennas that need to be maintained and things like that. So we got people that are working in the line of fire, and there ought to be an offset for that, right? Their pay ought to reflect what they're doing. The annual structure, we talked about that. This is where the setting pay is at. This is the exercise that I would have us go through in teams here in the class, and you can do that yourself, because the discussion about it is the next few slides and the next few pages in your handout on that. We look at the things that would impact the setting of pay, and you've got probably 4 pages for this one slide in your handout and the exercise. Then if we're going to promote somebody, that also impacts salary, right? Compensation, and sometimes we try to promote people and say, well, the title is in lieu of pay, and you know, banks are real good at doing that. You know, they'll hire somebody that's a brand new teller, but they give them some sort of title that gives them the perception of more authority, but they're not. They're still just doing what a frontline teller does. And so be careful with titles. Titles are not in lieu of pay. Promotion is a change in responsibility, not a change in title. Titles should be something that the company uses to your advantage. And what I mean by that is, it wasn't unusual for me to have one person that had 3 or 4 business cards, depending on what they were doing and who they were talking to. If they had the capability of being an expert field engineer, I don't want that business card to say they're a salesperson. But if they're in a negotiation, I want them to have a business card that says that they're, you know, an account expert or something, an executive account manager or something like that, so that the title on the card matches the task that they're trying to do, and they can have more than one title on cards. I mean, not on the same card. And that's not for them to make more money, that's for them to help do their job better for the company. And we give titles based on, sometimes in some negotiations, people don't want to talk to anybody, it's not a vice president. If you're short of vice presidents, then name somebody vice president and put it on their card and say, this is 2-week conditional vice president, or whatever you need to do to get the thing done. And that's a little ridiculous, but that's still the idea. If you are going to shut down an office, reduction in force, or change the band of pay that a person is in, got to be very careful. But you have to have a discussion about that. I mean, you have to have a mechanism for that, because from time to time you have to do that. There's a need to do that. The government will say we're shutting down a post office in that little town by Torrey or someplace, I don't know. They're constantly opening and closing things, and government employees are being reduced in force because of expansion or contraction. Pay retention can sometimes be played with. It's kind of like an advance on commission. The government uses that as a tool sometimes to smooth out pay when they're going to reassign somebody somewhere else. They're not going to fire them or idle them. They're going to reutilize the asset, so they will provide a slush account that will allow for retention, so they have that talked about. There are special situations that come up this OCONUS is CONUS is the root word. It's an acronym like the government has. That's for the continental United States. So you make more money if you're up in Alaska. It's not the continental United States, because there's a water bill that costs more there, or whatever. It's because there's an offset for living up there. And then there's foreign pay and foreign language proficiency. So we've kind of zoomed through lesson 6, and I present that to you as a sample. There are 17 of these that I have that I will post on Canvas. So if you have an interest in looking at them further or collecting them just as a resource, this is a good model because it's working for the government. It's a model they're using. So if we apply pieces that make sense for our business, then I think that's a valuable thing to do. What I want to do is show a video before we go on break. This is a 7-minute video, I think. And this is the one about businesses. We'll talk a little bit about it. And we're going to come back and change topics to why the Titanic sank. We're going to watch 7 businesses that never fail. And, that's a pretty strong word. Never doesn't always mean never. It's 8 minutes long. When this is done, we'll take a break.
A business, but are worried about the high failure rates associated with new businesses. It's a valid concern. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 20% of U.S. small businesses fail within the first year. That number jumps to around 50% by the end of the 5th year, and after 10 years, 2/3 of businesses have gone under. Those are sobering statistics. But the good news is that there are certain businesses that enjoy remarkably high success rates. We are going to cover 7 of the best. Now let me start by saying that there is no business that will never fail. Any enterprise where you can make serious money is going to have some risk associated with it. In fact, there is a well-known principle called the risk-return trade-off that states that as the potential return rises, so does the risk. It's why stocks produce much higher yields over the long term than a typical bank savings account. Now, if you look at really high-yielding assets, like businesses, they can often generate returns well above 30%. But all of that comes with some serious risk of failure, as we covered at the top of this video. But don't lose hope. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to cover 7 types of businesses with very low failure rates. I will also include data showing these low failure rates and point you to some great resources to show you how you can get started in these enterprises. Now I want to emphasize how important it is to examine failure rates if you are thinking about starting up a business. Most entrepreneurs devote a lot of time, energy, and money to launching their new company. if you are thinking about starting a business, it's crucial that you pick one that is likely to succeed. Maybe you have an exceptional business mind and can buck the trend. But, like Katniss Everdeen, I find that having the odds in your favor is always a good thing. On that note, let's get into it. Number 1. Laundromats. Laundromats enjoy an amazingly low failure rate. According to Laundrolux, laundromats enjoy a 95% success rate over a 5-year period. Again, nothing is guaranteed in business, but that seems tantalizingly close. This is a great recession-proof business that can make you money no matter what else is happening in the economy. After all, people will always need to get their clothes washed and dried. The great thing about a laundromat is that it can be run mostly passively. The machines do all of the hard work of washing and drying the clothes, and your customers do the work of loading and unloading the clothes. You will still need to take care of cleaning the laundromat, making repairs to the machines when needed, and collecting the money from the machines. But even for these activities, you can hire people to do them for you. If you want to learn more about starting a passive laundromat business, check out the link to my detailed article on the topic in the description section below. In fact, as I promised at the beginning of the video, I have included links to my guides on how to start almost all of the businesses I talk about here, so please explore those articles if you want to learn more. Number 2. Rental property businesses. This one is near and dear to me. I am an avid believer in real estate investing and own 9 rental properties. They have been the single biggest contributor to my financial success. But don't just take my word for it. Andrew Carnegie is famously quoted as saying, 90% of all millionaires become so through owning real estate. More money has been made in real estate than in all industrial investments combined. So it should come as no surprise that real estate investing enjoys an enviable 85.3% success rate, according to Advisor Smith, a commercial insurance company who examined statistics from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Why is real estate such a great business? You can enjoy cash flow each month, your tenants pay down your mortgage for you, and your properties tend to appreciate over the long term. If you combine these features with the fact that you can buy rental properties with a loan and use that leverage to increase your returns even more, you have a powerful wealth generator. Plus, your rental property business can be structured to generate passive income. All you need to do is hire a property manager, but you don't need to. I manage all 9 of my properties myself and only spend between 5 to 10 hours per month. That's pretty passive in my opinion. Number 3. Self-storage facilities. If you like the idea of real estate investing, but don't want to deal with tenants, trash, and toilets, self-storage facilities may be a great option for you. According to Rhino Building, a leading builder of self-storage facilities, these resilient businesses enjoy a remarkable 92% success rate. And if you want to make your self-storage business as passive as possible, you can start an unmanned self-storage business. Advances in technology make this not only possible, but easy. People can now use their phones to book the storage unit, obtain the code to unlock the unit, and simply move their stuff in. No on-site manager is needed. Number 4. Transportation businesses. With the emergence of e-commerce, the gig economy, and online platforms, it is more lucrative than ever to start a transportation business. If you don't know what it is, a transportation business is simply a business that delivers goods or people from one place to another for a fee. It can come in many forms, from a full-fledged long-haul trucking business to a simple little side hustle driving for Uber on the weekend, and everything in between. And these types of businesses enjoy a very good success rate of 76.4% according to that same article by Advisor Smith. Now, your results may vary, and certain transportation businesses are going to be more risky than others, but on average, you are looking at a really solid success rate. Number 5. Vending machine routes. One of my favorite businesses is a vending machine route. With a relatively modest investment, like $3,000 to $5,000, you can buy a vending machine and just get started. Once you have your vending machine, all you need to do is find a well-trafficked location that will generate sales for you. It's really as simple as that. Start with a single machine, figure out how the business works, and then slowly expand. Before you know it, you could have a vending machine empire that can generate thousands of dollars a month in mostly passive income for you. So, what is the success rate for a vending machine business? A whopping 90%, according to Drops Vending, a long-standing provider of nationwide vending services. When you combine the low failure rate, affordable startup costs, and simple operations of this business, I think you have a winning formula. Number 6. Agriculture businesses. Agriculture businesses are highly resilient and tend to have low failure rates. These can encompass many different types of businesses, including farms and a host of related businesses. Agriculture businesses enjoy an awesome 88% success rate, according to Advisor Smith. So if you have a green thumb and an interest in farming or other agriculture-related businesses, this may be perfect for you. Number 7. Dump truck businesses. According to Small Biz Trends, the mining industry has the greatest survival rate among all sectors. Of course, starting a mining company is going to be complex and take a lot of capital. But there is a clever little backdoor way to capitalize on the stability of companies in the mining industry. You can start a dump truck business. If you live near mining operations, there will likely be demand for dump trucks that can haul away coal or other materials being extracted from the mine. The great thing is that you don't have to spend millions of dollars to start a mining operation. A used dump truck can be bought for as little as $15,000. Not only that, dump trucks are versatile. You are not limited to working with the mining industry. So even if you don't live near a mine, there can be plenty of demand for your services coming from construction companies, landscapers, real estate flippers, and even residential property owners who need to haul away large amounts of junk. So there you have it, 7 great businesses that enjoy awesome success rates. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button.
Showed that simply because I've talked to everybody in this room, and many of you, I know you have aspirations to some point in time do something either on the side or transition to establishing a business full time. And the obvious stuff, as you watch that, you're going, okay, well, I don't use a laundromat. I got a washer dryer. That's what Lowe's and Home Depot do to us. Well, there's an awful lot of America that does use a laundromat. And you look at some of those other businesses, farming, you go, well, I don't have land, but we're now in a society that you can grow weed in your backyard and get a license and it's legal, and that's a farm. And you can grow petunias, you can grow other things, truck farming, vegetables and things like that are possibilities. I'm not telling you to do those things, I'm just saying we ignore that. We think about inventing this great widget that has a success and failure rate of 30% or something. It's like, more fail than don't. Restaurants, for example, very hard business to get in and make it work. You look in this town, how many restaurants we've lost. We've just lost another one at the mall. And that's a well-financed one. And did we?
Oh, I was
Was
just
it the
wondering
pizza
if
place?
the kind of dumpy pizza place kind of failed.
Oh, well, that one did too. I wasn't even thinking about that one. I was thinking the one in the parking lot, where
Oh, yeah.
Boca de Beppo's was at, and
Oh, there was a hash house.
Ruby Tuesday, that building.
Like they can't
The
run those businesses.
what was the name of that restaurant?
Hash House.
Hash House and Go Go.
But they do good in Vegas, don't they?
They're owned by Olive Garden and another one that we know,
Red Lobster.
Red Lobster. Yeah, and so I don't know why they failed in this market. That's a bad location or something. I don't know what it's nobody's succeeded at that location. It ought to be an awesome location.
It's
You
that
look-
intersection.
Maybe it is. And it didn't.
Ever since Walmart left that mall, it's
Yeah, C's left too. This is me out.
See- oh, did they?
Chocolate, yeah.
So back to the basics is, there's 7 businesses that have high success rates. And many of them, the idea of having passive income, you're involved in one of them every day. And the rental market is awesome because, somebody else pays your mortgage for you. But you gotta have some capital to get in. You gotta have some credit to get into that one. More so than buying a used dump truck maybe. Most people's pickup trucks cost more than the dump trucks cost, and we don't have so many mines around here, but you see a lot of dump trucks, don't you? We haul dirt and fill everywhere in this place. So, anyway, that's that. We'll come take a break. We're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about the Titanic. And we'll talk about that as long as we need to talk about it. If it takes the rest of the class, that's fine. I have other things to talk about, but everybody that wants to present today can do that. So come back prepared, and we'll talk about the Titanic. See you in 10 minutes or so.
question. Would you say that there are more issues encountered with setting a maximum pay than the benefits that come with it? Because part of me feels like, it gives employees something to work towards. Right, it gives them that, if I get to maximum pay, that's great. But at the same time, it can set that limitation for people that have been there for, the company I'm working for, there've been people that have been there like 30 plus years, and if they're sitting at max pay, then they have no reason for growth or improvement.
You'll lose people with max pay.
Yeah?
I'm not in favor of max pay. I am in favor of a base pay range, but to me, the ideal world is all pay ought to be performance based. If you're a fisherman, your pay is based on how good a fisherman you are.
Yeah.
If you don't catch any fish, you don't eat. It's just the way it is. And the better you are, the better you get, the more rewarded you are. And so I like to see just about every job associated with some sort of performance bump, so that the boss isn't telling me how much I can make. I'm telling how much I can make. If I can raise the bar, if I can get faster at it, if I can invent a better way to do it, then I'm in control to some degree of my pay. And all jobs you can't do that. I get that. But the jobs that convert to piece rate are an example of that. So if I want to get paid more, I go faster and figure out ways to go faster. And unless in some cultures the boss will take that away from you and go, oh well, that's too much, and then that's a bad place to work.
Yeah.
But establishing something where somebody can be aggressive and go do well, they gotta get paid more. And then it's no maximum. It's like the guy an auto mechanic at Stephen Wade. They're paid flat rate. So most
Faster you go, the more money you make.
faster and the smarter the better you go. Getting it right the first time, not leaving bolts out and having to this is something that, and put it back together. Those things, a good flat rate tech, some of the people in this room have been one, a good flat rate tech can turn 20 hours in an 8-hour day pretty regularly. That means they're just really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And
My father actually works at Steve
Yeah.
White, and he's a tech. He's a master tech now, so
Yeah.
he makes a fair amount on flat
Yeah,
rate.
yeah, and you can, and I think that's a great thing because you're on your own to make more money. You don't go to the boss and say, I want more money, when you can, but the boss is gonna say, okay, let me help you turn more hours. That's all you gotta do.
It's surprising when you get other offers, though, how much money they actually, have in store for you when it comes down to
Well,
it.
you're in an interesting scenario, and
Yeah, I was talking to HR today about compensation. So.
yeah,
Very on
you're in a
point.
very interesting
Yeah.
scenario there, and a pretty cool one, I think.
Yeah.
do we wanna do this? Who wants to go first and talk about the root cause analysis of why Titanic sank? I see Andrew. And I
I'll
see
go
Jake,
after you.
and I see Brad, and I see Eli. So Andrew, Jake, Brad, Eli.
I don't really have like a presentation. Do I need to get up?
That's
and
okay.
Okay.
Yeah. that's it.
So my root cause analysis. My wife is a giant Titanic fan, right? Grew up with her grandma, who was also a giant Titanic fan. Anything Titanic, they gobbled it all up. So I sat down to watch some documentaries on Amazon Prime, and the first one that popped up was called The Shocking Truth, right? And I'm like, all right, this is going to be some insightful, just mind-blowing reason about why the Titanic sank. And initially when this documentary started, very low quality, very low budget, and I was like, I don't know if I want to get into this one. And the first thing this guy says was, well, it was insurance fraud. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? We've never heard anything close to that there was any kind of conspiracy theory behind it or anything like that. And even my wife was like, oh, listen, we're not even going to listen to this, to turn it off. And I was like, what? All right, let's see what he's got to say. And as he went through this documentary, he made a lot of valid points. You've got a timeline up there, and it starts with the captain, Captain Smith, right? And it starts on the Olympic, which is the sister ship to the Titanic. And on that ship, he was involved in 3 different accidents. Where in the last accident, it was involved with a British naval ship, where this ship was small enough that the propellers on the Olympic actually drug it in and caused a massive hole and popped off one of the propellers. So in order to, because the loss of the Olympic was so economically catastrophic that they couldn't repair that without, I mean, it was a complete wash, right? It would be to the equivalent of bending your frame on your car, right? They would just cash you out. So instead of doing that, they repaired the side of the ship and took the propeller from the unfinished Titanic, which was marked with 401, right, and put it on the Olympic. And then right before the maiden voyage of the Titanic, or sorry, let me back it up. I gotta set a precedence for why it was not the Titanic in the Olympic, right? Because it was in an accident with a government vessel, and the Admiralty got involved, and the Admiralty said, well, it was the fault of the Olympic, despite firsthand accounts, eyewitness testimony of people, third party. The Admiralty said, no, it was the Olympic's fault. So the insurance company said, it's your fault, we're not paying it out. So it was a complete wash. They're out this money, right? So they decided to fix it, put the propeller on from the Titanic onto the Olympic. And it's documented that Captain Smith drove these boats like they were speedboats. He was on several other vessels throughout his career that had similar accidents with them, right? So he was known as a hothead as far as driving these boats. So as they're getting closer to the launch of the Titanic, White Sail, I think it is, or White Star, that owns these boats, they came up with this plot, right? How are we going to get paid out on this boat that is basically worthless now? We've invested millions of dollars into this boat. How are we going to make it work? So on the Titanic and the Olympic, there were several items that were unique to those boats, right? The floors were different. The life vests were different, had the names on them. the names on the side of the boats. All of White Star's boats, except for those two, had engraved names on the hulls, right? The Titanic and the Olympic are the only two boats that have them riveted on, which would be an easy swap to make. And they talked about this, and all they had to do is swap out the lifeboats, swap out the vests. Everything else inside the two boats were White Star general products, right? There was no names on them, no indicators, just generic products. So they did this swap, and during the initial inspection of the Titanic, there was no real inspection made. They just put the boat on the water, did a little test drive, lazy little test drive, boom, it's good to go. This is after the swap, right? And the Olympic, or the original Titanic, had a very extensive inspection, and it passed with flying colors. And now that would be the original Titanic. Other indicators that would point to this are, so there are people that run the furnaces, right? Now these are all Irishmen, a lot of them out of work, a lot of them fighting to put food on the table for their families. None of them would get on the Titanic. None of them would take the job, except for two in this documentary. Only two of them returned to work for this maiden voyage. Nobody else wanted to get on. They're like, nope, we don't like this boat. There's something fishy going on about this. And even John Pierpont Morgan was scheduled to be on this boat, but in the 11th hour, he canceled his ticket. Now, if you don't know who that is, that's J.P. Morgan. For those of you that are a little bit more familiar with that name, he was scheduled. He had a ticket for this voyage, and at the last minute, he said, "No, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go on this voyage." And he also had expensive art that he had offloaded from the Titanic. Now, J.P. Morgan owned the parent company of White Stars, so he had financial interest in this, and that comes in later on down the line. Boiler room number 10 on the Titanic had a fire blazing in it. Now, if you're a sailor, you know that fire is your worst enemy when you're on open seas. For whatever reason, I don't know. I didn't go too far into that. But Boiler Room 10 apparently had a fire going in it for a week before it left dock, and that could have been backup plan B, right? So as they take off, and a lot of the upper echelon that were supposed to be on this boat, they also, like friends of the people, canceled their tickets as well. So when the Titanic left port, they were only offering second class rooms to first class buyers. None of their first class rooms were full, right? So they weren't at max capacity, or I mean, it was probably overloaded anyways, but those rooms weren't occupied. So they go out, and before they leave, a different ship, the California, which is also a luxury liner, left a week early with nobody on board, no hull or anything like that, except for some burlap blankets, right? Now they're going out, and they've got expert testimony from many other captains that were on the sea that night, and a lot of them said, you know, we could see an iceberg from 6 to 10 miles away. I don't know why they couldn't see this one. And the turning radius of the Titanic is like 800 yards, right? So it's pretty quick. But somehow they failed to see it. Now, the California comes into play because there was a lot of communication happening that night about where are the icebergs at. between ships in the area. Well, there's one here, there's one there. We don't see any. But there were several communications specifically between the Titanic and the California, where the California was giving the Titanic its exact location. Not the location of icebergs, but its exact location. Well, why would they do that? Why do they need to know that? This is a ship that is making its maiden voyage. Why do they need to know where this other ship is 10 miles away or whatever? So they hit the iceberg, and they don't send out any signals for, I think the first signal that they sent out was like 30 minutes afterwards, right? And the flares that they sent up were colored, red, white, and blue. Now, this was supposed to be their signal to the California, hey, it's time to come and get us, right? You need to be in the area, you need to come and get us. But throughout the night, the Titanic had veered off course so far that the California didn't see these signals. Now, the California did see other signals in the area, but they were attributed to an illegal sealing operation that was in visual sight, and they were popping up flares, and they were popping up just white flares so they could see what they were doing, so they could see their boats in the water. Because they didn't match, the California didn't do anything until it was already too late, and they realized, hey, the ship's gone down. So they beeline it over there to find the Carpathian had already picked people up. They had, they missed their shot. So now all of this loss of life has happened. 1,500 people have died, and the California wasn't there to rescue these guys, right? So the American and the British inquiry happened, and the dude presiding over the British inquiry, Lord Mersey, his main focus of that whole inquiry was to Captain Stanley Phillip of the California. How come you weren't there? This is your fault. There was no real inquiry towards White Star, towards the builder of the Titanic, towards J.P. Morgan, the captain, Captain Smith. Obviously he was dead, right? But there were other people that were on the crew that survived. There was no real hard interrogation to these people about why this happened. His main focus was on the captain of the California. How come you let all these people die? And there was questions about, well, what flares did you see? Did you see the red, white, and blue? No, we only saw white. Well, what flares did you see? What flares did you see? And from the captain of the California to the captain and to the first mate of the California, anytime they would tell something to the inquiry that Mersey didn't like, he would interrupt them. He wouldn't let them finish. So it was very much, why did you let this happen? When this dude wasn't even on the same boat. He was 10 miles away. So it struck me as odd that he would try and pin this tragedy on somebody that wasn't even close when it happened, right? He wasn't on the ship. He didn't see the iceberg coming. And there was some political climate to that whole thing, right? So if the Irish people found out, or if the Commonwealth found out that, so let me back up. I'm all jumbled because I don't have it all written out all nice and neat. Because J.P. Morgan had a financial investment in this, if this came out to the point where it was White Star's fault that this had happened, then they would have to shut down White Star. And J.P. Morgan owned some of that, so he had the ability, if they were to shut it down, he had the ability to come in and seize his assets because he owned that stuff. And if he came in and he did that, then 20,000 people would lose their jobs. So the British government said, no, let's, because we don't want to lose that boat. So let's just let this be what it is. And then later, Lord Mersey was found to be corrupt on a different case, the Lusitania 6. It was found that he was corrupt in that case. He was given a note to pin that problem on the captain, even though it wasn't that captain's fault. So if he'd done it once, who's to say that he wouldn't do it again, especially for political consideration? So at the end of the day, for me, it was all about greedy men trying to save face. And that's why the Titanic sunk.
Very interesting theory.
And there are photos. I looked this up because I was like, nah, there's no way. There are photos of the hull of the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean, right? Where the name has eroded away and those pieces have fallen off of the hull, and you can see the outline of an M and a P. It's very faint, right? And if you are tin hat conspiracy theorists, that's enough proof right there. But I looked on Reddit and I was reading a lot of these, a lot of the comments, and there, you know, it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And there's one that stood out to me. I have been a member of the Historical Society of the Titanic since I was 12, and da 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 da. That is definitely the Olympic. The Titanic never sank. All right. Well, I don't know what to take from that, but at the end of the day, either way you go with it, if you go with the poor design or the stress that the manufacturer or White Star was under to make this boat actually happen, for this voyage to actually happen, it's all the same, right? To save face, to make money. And there was another point that they made. Back then there were like absolutely zero worker rights, right? And it was very easy to coerce somebody to say, hey, if you bring this to light, you know something, but if you talk about this, you're never going to work again. Your family's never going to work in this industry again. Your daughters, your sons, you're never going to work here ever again. Or you take them out back and beat them up. So there was a lot of pressure to keep your mouth shut. There was no whistleblower laws back then.
Power's always been power, hasn't it?
Yes.
One way or the other, and corruption's always been corruption. So the root cause from your perspective after doing that research is most likely financial greed on the part of an owners. And the way they executed it based on that research is you did a swap. They put the lousy boat out there and they crashed it on purpose?
They crashed it on purpose so they could claim that insurance money. And before the maiden voyage, they increased the insurance payout on this ship, so they didn't just get paid out for what the ship cost them, right? They got paid out for $12.5 million in then what it was back then, right? So if you include inflation over the years, you're talking billions, right?
Interesting research. How about that presentation?
It was a little disjointed, yeah.
I didn't see anybody going to sleep. It was like, what, insurance fraud? I have done this exercise quite a few times for quite a few years. And
I've never heard
had
that.
somebody presented that. That's very interesting.
I've never heard that. And I mean, me and my wife went to the Titanic show down in Vegas. You know, we've watched Titanic too many times, in my opinion. But it was just something, it just caught me off guard because I never heard that. Well, all right, let's follow this a little bit, see
And
where
as
it
we
goes.
said, it's not a right or wrong answer. If you don't find that finding in your assessment, we're gonna hear three more in a minute and maybe another one, depending on, that's okay. Because nobody knows for sure. JP never went to prison for that. And had they verified it, now White Star didn't survive in the long run, but still, that's an interesting theory. Jake, you were next, is that right?
Well, mine's not so conspiracy theory. It's more,
It's okay.
it's more into what I believed. But we all know that the Titanic sunk. unsinkable boat. We're tasked to find out how we think that happens. It hit us. But it started actually again with the captain. I do kind of agree with that. The captain, he was trying to set a speed record, as he did with all the other boats, I guess, But, and when the Titanic struck the iceberg, it was traveling 22 knots, 25.3 miles per hour, and it was approaching its top speed through heavy ice-heavy water. The boat's top speed was like 26 miles an hour, so this is like 0.7-ish, miles per hour less than top speed. So it's 1.2. I would think that it was poor leadership on the captain's fault because ice heavy water and you're going as fast as you can, that's never a good sign. But it also kind of led down to the fact that he didn't get enough information when he was making this decision to keep going that fast. So let me see here. So after the tragedy happened, they were doing some research and stuff like that, and found that there was wireless radio operator dismissed a key warning that was radioed from California. The California radio to the Titanic, it was dense ice field, and yet they failed to begin their transmission with the prefix MSG, which is short for Master Service Ground. Without that prefix, the radio operator Jack Phillips considered the warning message non-urgent. Another tragedy happened when we heard radio frequencies and stuff like that that they ignored Pearl Harbor. So if they had gotten that communication with the captain, maybe the captain would just pull back a little bit, and slow down, through the dense water. But I also think that it was another piece. This was a puzzle actually. So there's another piece of the puzzle that the lookouts had no binoculars, so they couldn't see far away. So they're out there just with their eyes, But if they could see far away, they might be able to see a big iceberg or another ship or something like that. And the reason why they didn't have their spy glasses was because the second officer, David Blair, was transferred off the ship before the Titanic left Southampton. He forgot to turn the key over to the officer who replaced him. So what a piece of work that guy, right? It gets better. So just for that guy, I wanted to read into him, and his I guess granddaughter, great granddaughter, actually sold that key for $3-some-odd million at an auction.
Wow.
And as memorabilia and stuff like that. But she said that her story was that her granddad or great granddad, whoever it was, continuously said that was his memento from the day he almost died. And if it was me, I would be like trying to get rid of that key because
Yeah,
it's like
I didn't
this is
have
a
it.
memento of millions or thousands of people that I killed.
Yeah.
And he was keeping it as a memento, I almost died on that boat. But that was the only key that possibly could have saved all those lives.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that guy was kind of a piece of work. So the Titanic left Southampton and started going through. They got the communications, but with the lack of the knowledge of that, and as well as the steering on that boat was a new style steering. And when they said, hey, we see an iceberg. If we turn hard starboard, maybe we can miss it. They turned the other way, so they turned into it instead of away from it. And so those were the pieces of the puzzle that kind of led to, in my belief, how it sunk. But then it also kind of goes back to the construction of the boat. Because of those labor laws, it was held together with rivets. Not so much skilled labor going on back then for welding the rivets. They actually did a research on the actual rivets from the boat and found that there was large amounts of slag in the rivets, which meant even if that boat probably hit the iceberg at a quarter of the speed, it still would break apart. It just wasn't fastened together correctly. so, my conclusion is that poor construction, poor decision-making on the captain, poor, execution of the radio operator, and lack of far sight is essentially what led to the boatswain.
Okay. No insurance fraud on that one?
No, I didn't get down that path.
So, so your question was, I mean, your statement, proposition was it wasn't the Titanic that sunk in the first place. And regardless of which brand it is, you're looking at
I was just looking at the backs.
at the actual accident itself. And so you came up with several root causes that are related, so that any one of them could have been a contributory factor. When we talk about industrial accidents, for example, there's often a lot of factors, aren't there, that any one of those things could have prevented the accident from occurring, but the perfect storm of having them all together at once caused tragedy, for sure. So, good job. Who was going next, Brad or Eli? Eli?
I'm gonna go after one of them, cause everybody's taking all my stuff.
I was gonna say, I think mine is pretty much carbon copy right there, but, I think one of the big points that I didn't hear earlier that stuck out to me personally was that the communications officers on the RMS Titanic were not actually paid officers of the Titanic. They were employed by the, I forget what the comms company was, but there was a company that managed, that did all the telegraphs and stuff.
Marconi.
Marconi, yeah. And so they were all employees of the Marconi Telegraph Company. So they weren't even employed to radio or to relay those vital warnings about ice flows and stuff. And so you have this massive conflict of interest that arises with, well, they're paid to deal with passenger communications to people back home. So the way they earn their pay is by doing those communications. And you just have this major conflict of interest where you have, well, if you tie a guy's pay to banal conversations and then, and on the side, make sure that we don't all die. I mean, you have a massive gap there. And that was the major root cause that I saw, along with all the poor decision making. One of the root causes of more people dying, in my opinion, was the lack of lifeboats. Like 16 aboard the ship, because that was the requirement as per maritime law at the time. There was no actual requirement based upon the number of passengers or people aboard the ship. It was just a number that was thrown out, and you have 16? Cool. There's how many people can fit on those? No,
The ship's not gonna sink anyway, so.
Exactly. Who cares? I read somewhere that in a design meeting they've decided to lower the height of the bulkheads on the ship, and that, I mean, obviously bulkheads are what sections off the ship to stop water from flowing from one compartment to the other, and if you lower those, you have more of a gap for water to flow over. So it's just another big issue that arises. And then the other big root cause was that they didn't hit it head on. I mean, if they would have hit the iceberg head on, it's more likely that the ship would have stayed afloat, because you have one collision bulkhead that's in almost all the ships in those early days, and I believe we still do it nowadays, and it's completely sealed off. So if you ram the iceberg head on, that collision bulkhead just gets absolutely demolished, but the ship doesn't take on water throughout the rest of it. So in theory, if they wouldn't have tried to turn it away, if they would have just fully slammed into it, could have stayed afloat. I mean, I saw a bunch of pictures of old vessels that had done that, and you see them pulling into port, and it's just not like the whole front end is just caved in, but it's floating. So I think, combining just, bad driving of a massive boat, and then poor communications and poor materials. I mean, it really was like you said, kind of that perfect storm of watching documentaries and stuff. It's another really just minor thing, just another minor thing to slap onto the pile, and then that pile got too big.
Well, when you combine Jake's piece of information, when you turn left and turn right, so they did hit it more head on than they wanted to, but if they'd hit it really square head on, your point might have been that they might have shattered the iceberg, they might have split the iceberg, they might have absorbed the energy in a more safe manner. I had seen the piece that you brought out about the communication conflict. Because when you think about it, these people, this is 10? I don't know what year it is, but it's a long time ago, 100 some years ago. And so the people that are on that ship, you know, send a telegram to somebody, hey, you know, I'm on this ship, you know, we're going across the Atlantic, it's the biggest ship, blah, 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 it's an ego trip. So they're selling messages, right? And the analogy I saw was, it was like you're on a 747 airplane and the radio operator on the plane is not talking to flight control or to air traffic control, they're talking to your uncle and you know, they're sending messages to for all the passengers, and they're generating revenue off of that. You know, kind of like your minutes on Verizon or something, you know. And so they're selling telegrams, which is what Marconi's business was to sell they charged you by the letter, and the more you sent, the more the operator made. Meanwhile, the ship's hitting icebergs, and you know, he's not talking to the ships around.
But you know what? He made an extra buck, so.
And flipped.
Yeah.
He went down with the ship
Oh,
too.
he did? I thought he
Well, I
flipped.
thought one of them
Yeah, they
lived.
I think
because
one
they
of
had
them's
to
about
lived,
dead.
testify,
and one of them
yeah.
died.
Oh, yeah,
that's
right.
right. All right, so Brad, you up?
Okay, it's getting really slim now.
Well, now everybody doesn't have to present new stuff. You can iterate some of your findings because maybe we all agree on what the root cause is. You know, maybe not.
So I don't know if everything's,
Insurance
maybe it
fraud.
relates to it's kind of on the same as everyone, but you know, I didn't check the website, so after our last class, I should have checked the sources, but no one knows. But when he's talking about the master servicegram, it says that requires the captain to acknowledge a message. So I guess that's the importance of that. So if the captain would have seen it, maybe get in some last minute things. I was on a site that said that there's pressure to set a world record across the Atlantic Ocean. So that could be the reason why they're going to 23.5 knots or something you're saying. But conspiracy is he was pressuring the captain to keep
Yeah.
fast speeds regardless on April 13th. And Bruce Ismay, he was in charge of the White Star Line, and so maybe if they would have done a different route, that the icebergs wouldn't have been there, but pressure to do the fastest from point A to B across the Atlantic, maybe they took the wrong route with the icebergs because of that. Let's see. So, and then 10 days before the voyage, a fire broke out in the coal bunker, and it continued to burn. So when it met with the freezing water, the hull's integrity was compromised. But also, I figured out that due to the size of the Titanic, that it could not fit in the Harland Wolff shipyard in Belfast. So instead of the bows being hydraulically constructed, they were constructed by hand. So because of the weak infrastructure when it hit the iceberg, that could be a reason why it went down. And an interesting thing too is there's portholes super low, and I don't know if they did or not, but people opening the portholes kind of like, you know, making the ship sink way faster than it needed to be because everyone wanted to look out and see what happens. So they opened the portholes and then it filled with water, so then the Titanic sank a lot quicker. So kind of just the company culture, kind of I seen the stuff on there that for company culture, apparently they removed the lifeboats, and so they didn't have the minimum required for the amount of passengers for first class cabinets, so they were sacrificing safety, and that was a call by the owners of the company. The engineering culture, having portholes to open that would, you know, make the boat sink quicker, that's not a good idea. And then having the, let's see here. Sorry, 1 second. The rivets also, they didn't operate well in low temps. It went kind of scientific, or not scientific, physics with the rivets and why they didn't do good in low temperatures, which the Atlantic is very, very cold. And it seems like they wanted first class cabinets, so that's why the water holes were only watertight horizontally, not vertically. It said that they raised them even higher in the air to make more room for the first class cabinets, so it seemed like they were more focused on being bougie than safety. So for travel culture, you know, just kind of like, I don't know, maybe bank's too big to fail, boat too big to sink or something, you know, it's kind of the mentality I've got from that,
I
you know,
think
the
so,
society
yeah.
culture was this boat, you know, it's an unsinkable boat, so, yeah, so I feel like for my root cause analysis, it's just kind of a lot of different things went wrong, and obviously the stuff where during the shift change, the keys were not handed over, propellers could only go forward and not in reverse, and competing for world record, going faster than you should, probably played a big impact when hitting the iceberg as well. And after they do double hulls, they do taller bulkheads, and there's mandatory use of electronic communication, and they also up the minimum lifeboat capacity, and there's ice patrol. It's kind of like given the Titanic, kind of seeing what sort of precautions that they're doing to prevent something like this happening again. So those are a couple things that, you know,
So we
Yes, we live and
instituted
learn.
some corrective actions based on
We got it.
what they thought was some root causes at that point in time.
yeah.
The National Transportation Safety Board equivalent, whatever that was, the Maritime Agency, changed some of the rules. And you brought up, again, the bulkhead that Eli had brought up, that bulkhead height, and you put a reason behind it. It was because you said they wanted to have more clearance for first class.
First class cabinet, so it was only horizontal, it wasn't vertical, so when it started tipping, it could go over. And I guess there's something with wanting more first class cabinets.
Yeah, they didn't seal off.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of not a useful bulkhead, is it? And the portholes, that's a new piece that we hadn't heard up to this point.
Yeah.
What are these windows doing on this submarine?
Well,
No, it's-
for the portholes, to add to my claim that it was insurance fraud, right? No, so the Olympic and the Titanic are supposed to be identical,
Mhm.
almost,
So
right?
some of the windows facing.
So there's a photo of the Olympic and the Titanic side by side, right? One in the forefront, one in the background, and you can count the portholes. On the Olympic, there are 14. On the Titanic, there are 12. Then there's a photo of the Titanic as it's leaving port, and all of a sudden there's 2 more. Where'd they come from?
The old switcheroonie, huh?
Where'd they come from?
Whole solid
Okay,
just drilling in
There you go.
How did the Titanic go then?
It was still working. They just swapped the names and used it as a regular liner.
Okay.
It just didn't it didn't make a record-breaking trip across
They
the.
didn't talk about it
Yeah.
They didn't talk
anymore.
about it. Yeah, we're not gonna-
You don't talk about
You
Bruno.
don't talk
Some of
about
the-
the sister of
Some of
the
the stuff I
Titanic.
was looking at, to back him up a little bit, the captain, they said, during the whole thing, they said, captain's like, lower these boats or do this, whatever, and the guy was like, hey, we're not on the Olympic, this is the Titanic, you're thinking the Olympic. He's like, oh, crap. We're not on the Olympic. I read that in several different
I
places.
wanted to say one more thing, but I know that you're waiting, so I don't know if you have it.
Just
I
go
said
ahead,
one more
just
fun
say it.
fact. Apparently he was set to retire. So now maybe he's, not paying attention.
They're taking it all
He's drunk
seriously,
on his
huh?
Might have been drinking at the time.
Apparently it was his last voyage. He was set to
It
retire.
really was.
Allegedly.
Yeah,
She's
well,
gonna pick
yeah.
it up right now.
Yeah.
You're gonna be out of bullets.
Before it sunk, it was his last one. He was gonna
Okay.
retire, but.
I'll save you something,
Okay.
because I don't really have much different.
Okay, you're up.
Okay, my turn. Okay, so I love the Titanic too. I have no idea why. I've been to that exhibit twice in Vegas, which is awesome, but it must be a girl thing. I don't know, but
It's a Leonardo thing.
I guess
That's what it is.
it's just so luxurious and so horrifying at the same time. But I really think that I like his conspiracy theory. I'm into that, but I felt like the biggest thing was the construction of the ship with the stainless steel panels, and if they'd been able to use stainless rivets on the curved areas of the ship, because they didn't even use good quality wrought iron. They used like a third quality down on the rivets.
There it is.
So that's part of the insurance fraud that they did. And but I feel like after looking at everything, so they had insufficient lifeboats. They should have had 48 for that capacity of people, but they only had 16. But one thing they didn't do was any safety drills, and they had planned safety drills, and then they just blew it off. And I think that their confidence that it was unsinkable is what really killed them, because if they had thought there had been a chance that they could sink, they would have had enough lifeboats, they would have had the training, because when it went down, they didn't even load a lot of those boats halfway, the life rafts. They just threw people in and took off. They could have loaded a lot more people in, so I just think it was kind of a cluster, you know, of bad things that happened. It's kind of like they were doomed in all of those places because there was no oversight over the whole thing. Like with the communications, you'd think that the captain would be over the communications crew, but that was just ridiculous. It kind of became like a grudge match, supposedly, between the people doing the communication and these other boats. They were kind of pissing each other off, and then just kind of like, well, I'm not talking to you anymore. Even when they would try, when like the California would try to contact these guys, they were so concerned because they had a cutoff time of like 2 hours to get all of these messages relayed, or else they were considering it a failure on their company. So there was just so many things that went wrong, like with binoculars, lack of training, lack of safety measures. But I really felt like, first of all, the construction was not good. And then their confidence, it was just totally misplaced. So they did not plan for the possibility of the need of safety.
You brought up the construction, and that goes back in time. That's 2-3 years earlier. And the business decisions that would be made during that time. And the Olympic had a wreck, and they had to stop Titanic at some point and fix the wreck on the Olympic.
You gotta think that somebody might have gotten a clue when they were looking back into it to see what had failed, or, you know, what worked and what didn't.
Well,
They maybe have a
were-
chance to fix something before.
Included board meetings and corporate meetings, and JP was at a few of those. You know, there's no question about that, and they're obviously a company watching the bottom line. So, you know, we're reflecting that, whether it was a switch of ship or not. It's still, that's something in the root, is the culture of the company, which, you know, they're trying to make a profit, trying to stay in
But you
business.
can't skimp on the very basics of the construction.
Safety first,
Yeah.
we talk about that in just about everything, and we've had some massive transportation problems. You know, the Hindenburg was in that same era,
Really
and,
stupid.
you know, it was an awesome way to fly, except for that it was
The
hydrogen.
gas.
It was almost an awesome way to
The flammable gas things all surrounded it.
You know,
Shoot, I had a good thought about like what you were just saying, and then I lost it. I don't know. It comes down to greed. Oh, I was gonna say that things like this just lead to better outcome throughout history. Like when we accept any piece of metal, we will not accept any metal into our property that doesn't have a mill test report. So it's an MTR. We won't let them offload it out of the trucks without that, because for years they would try and deliver steel, and then we'd have to go back and chase after the mill test reports to make sure that the steel is good integrity, that they had passed all of their certifications for each piece of steel. So obviously they weren't doing that then.
Right. And there were a lot of them. I forgot that you guys are experts in this. We're talking about plate steel on the Titanic. There were, 800 sheets of 1-inch thick plate.
And they were using stainless steel except for the curved areas, from what I understand. And they were using stainless steel, but then they couldn't use stainless steel rivets in the curved areas for some reason.
They didn't even wind up using steel rivets. They
Yeah, it
wound
was
up
wrought
using
iron.
ones.
So it
But
would
there were
shear
2
off.
million rivets. And you think about you buy 2 million of anything, even, you know, you buy 2 million screws, it's a lot of money. And those rivets are, you know, this long and this big around. Those things, even in 1909, weren't free, you know, and the cost of, turns out, of 1 million.
Then just don't build it.
I'm sorry?
Then just don't build it.
Yeah,
Because you
it-
make the inside look fabulous, and you provide the most amazing food, which I'm still watching. Like, I watch like what they fed people on the Titanic. This guy makes all the recipes. You know, I'm into it. But like, just just don't do it. If you're not gonna do it right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Never mind.
Wouldn't go away.
But yeah, they put it all into the aesthetics and the luxury and
Yeah.
skimped on the construction, which I know that some people do in home building too, so.
Exactly, and don't do the structural things and,
Mhm.
and the roof collapse on the Santa Clara Fire Department or
Yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
which maybe could have really happened. Right? We have time for one more, and then we'll have half done, and the other half can go next class. Harry, you're up.
I might as well jump in there with whatever I got left here.
Well, this gives everybody else a little chance
Yeah.
to find some more crumbs.
With communication, I had the same thing. They were making tips for the passenger messages. They had one line, and it was being clogged up by the other boats that were communicating ice here and there, as well as people on land that had telegraphs too. They were also getting those, and I guess it was squealing in their ear when the California was telling them about them being stopped for the night, and he basically told them, "Shut up! I'm trying to work here. I'm making money." So they went silent, and that was where I found that the California was quiet all night and didn't hear the distress call because they shut off the radio and basically went to bed and said, "This is where we're at." So I feel like it was kind of a breakdown, and of the 7 messages that were given to the captain, he only actually received 5 because of the MSG thing that wasn't stamped on. So I felt like that was a big part of the problem too. The communication wasn't getting to who it needed to get to. Engineering, bulkheads were lowered to make room for a grand staircase is what I found. With bulkheads being lowered allowed the water to overflow from one to the other, causing that with the sealed doors caused the weight in the front lifting back up till it finally snapped and came down. Also was the rivets using number 3, and they said standard was a number 4 iron, but they used a cheaper number 3, which didn't hold up in that cold weather and tore a seam in the boat. That with the captain going faster than he should, even though he was going southwest for longer than he should, thinking he was skirting some of the pack ice and other glaciers before he finally turned west, heading straight toward supposedly a rogue iceberg that came farther than it normally would have gone. So I feel like those factors, him going faster than he should be. I mean, he's seasoned. He should know the ice is there. You just don't go. It's like flying through the gorge at whatever with 100 and something miles. You just don't do it. You can, but the chances of the accident are much higher. So that and the message is not reaching him. I think probably I believe he was slowed down, and with the poor construction, the grazing that thing, just tore a seam open, and I forgot how many gallons of water they said were. About it. Somewhere in here we're just pouring in from one of the guys down shoveling coal, saw it coming through and got out. Also back then they had classes separated, single men, families, single women with children, and some of the areas had gates where they kept them separate, so that made it difficult for them to get out. Reducing the amount of lifeboats they had in the original 48 to 16, Ismay thought that people paid money to see the view, not a whole bunch of lifeboats blocking their view, so they reduced that. So I think all of those were probably the contributing factor, the safety of it, of not being able to have people having access to the boats and being able to get up to safety without the drills. I read as well. That's pretty much what I came up with.
Okay. We've heard some interesting pieces, haven't we? Lots and lots of pieces that add into it, and all of those are causes. When we do a root cause analysis, we really look into the cause behind the causes, and so we'll continue to explore that a little bit in our next class. And the other half of you make your presentations, and we'll wrap it up, and we'll look at a little documentary on it, and have one kind of final discussion on as far as we can take it, because we don't know either. But we do have a lot of evidence, more so now because we've, the wreck has been found, and pieces have been brought up. And 1985, we've been doing research on it with deep subs and everything, and trying to find out what ship it is. Is it JP's boat or somebody else's boat on there? We will come back and talk about that again next class. I want to introduce you to Simon with a video. We'll watch this and we'll be done in class. This is how great leaders inspire action. And we're talking about creating culture. We're trying to develop talent. And it comes back to some degree about leadership. I mean, we're talking about Smith being part of the problem with the Titanic sinking. Who's that? That's leadership. We're talking about the corporation behind the builder making some bonehead decisions to cut corners, and that's leadership. That's a philosophy of do we it's an ethics question. Do we put a substandard material in that risks 2,000 lives, or do we spend the money and have to make a few more trips back and forth before we pay it off? You know, that's a culture of an organization, and we've worked for both probably. We've seen some that will call it one way and others that will call it the other way. And I want to be on the bus that is doing it the ethical right way, that's going to last for the long haul. This is Simon Sinek, who I think is an interesting guy.
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight? The Wright brothers beat them to it. There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. And this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operated it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way. And it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat-screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat-screen TVs. They've been making flat-screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. Sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that, if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the .com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now, you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same three things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same three things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich, and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper. And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. And no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, that's an amazing discovery, guys, and I will improve upon your technology. But he didn't. He wasn't first. He didn't get rich. He didn't get famous. So he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? Something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And if you don't know the law, you definitely know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are our innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are our early adopters. The next 34% are your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people buy touch-tone phones is because you can't buy rotary phones anymore. We all sit at various places at various times on the scale, but what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if you want mass market success or mass market acceptance of an idea, you cannot have it until you achieve this tipping point between 15 and 18% market penetration, and then the system tips. And I love asking businesses, what's your conversion on new business? And they love to tell you, oh, it's about 10%, proudly. Well, you can trip over 10% of the customers. We all have about 10% who just get it. That's how we describe them, right? That's like that gut feeling, oh, they just get it. The problem is, how do you find the ones that just get it before you're doing business with them versus the ones who don't get it? So it's this here, this little gap, that you have to close, as Geoffrey Moore calls it, crossing the chasm. Because you see, the early majority will not try something until someone else has tried it first. And these guys, the innovators and the early adopters, they're comfortable making those gut decisions. They're more comfortable making those intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world and not just what product is available. These are the people who stood online for 6 hours to buy an iPhone when they first came out, when you could have just walked into the store the next week and bought one off the shelf. These are the people who spent $40,000 on flat screen TVs when they first came out, even though the technology was substandard. And by the way, they didn't do it because the technology was so great. They did it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. In fact, people will do the things that prove what they believe. The reason that person bought the iPhone in the first 6 hours, or stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo's a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you, we don't need it, we don't like it, you're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad. But he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead, not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead, not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
I will put that on Canvas because you might want to watch that again. It's on YouTube as well. He's written a lot of books. There's 4 of them. You can take a look at on the way out. Interesting, something to be learned there, I think, for all of us. So with that, we're going to call it a day. I got 3 minutes, but we're going to call it a day. Let you out early. Thank you. We will see you on Thursday and hear more Titanic conspiracy theories. Well done for those of you that presented. Thank you for doing that.
I'm hoping for one that tops yours. That's all I'm
You
saying.
know, there was also a cursed mummy on board.
So you were holding back.
Well, I mean, I didn't see, there were like 5 other ones, but I didn't see those until after I started getting into this one. And this one, politically, financially, economically, it made sense to me. And we have conspiracies this day and age that are much more elaborate, that get exposed, right? It was so much easier back then in the day, behind closed doors with a couple buddies, with a bourbon and a cigar,
Yep.
to make these kinds of decisions. And, you know, to the point of, well, there weren't enough lifeboats on board. Well, they didn't have enough time to switch all of them.
Well, they thought that the other ship was gonna pick up everybody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
we're
was
not
no
gonna kill
need.
anybody.
Yeah.
We're just gonna
If
sink the ship and collect the money.
I
If
thought
you-
were
if
saying
you go
burlap-
down that route, you know
I
what I
thought the
mean?
burlap sacks were planned to be body bags.
no, it was to keep people warm after they pulled them out of the water.
I thought it was just to collect the bodies. They were planning on it.
It was the hearse.
Yeah.